everyone, how are you? Just for context, I thought I'd let you know that I'm recording this in my bathroom because I've just got back into recording videos and I am too shy to do it downstairs because I'm worried that someone's going to hear me. And I'm also recording this on my phone, so I hope the quality is okay. So I thought I would start off a little tutorial series with drawing a dog portrait tutorial, since I've probably drawn more dog portraits than I have anything else. So obviously you've got to start off with the outline, and it's really important to get that right from the get-go. I'm using just a red coloured pencil here. I'm not doing much rubbing out because I've had a lot of practice, but you want to get that as perfect as you can from the get-go so you don't have to rub out very much. And also, before you even start with the outline, you want to use a really clear photograph that's got really good lighting. That's just the most important thing to start off with. There's no point trying to do a portrait of anyone using a terrible photograph because you won't be able to see. And that just goes for drawing anything really across the board. A good photograph or a good reference is the most important thing to start off with. So you need to get your outline perfect, as perfect as you can, before you go in with any colours, because it's really easy to rub out a really light outline, but once you start going in heavier with your colours, then that's going to be really hard to get rid of. So once you're pretty confident that you've got your outline perfect, what I like to do is go in with my really dark colours first. So I'm not using any black at the moment in this sketchbook, so I'm going in with a really dark green. This one is, I believe it's called dark sap green or sap green. So I'm going round the eyes, the middle of the eyes, and parts of the nose and the tongue. And then once you've done that, you'll be able to gauge how much contrast you're going to be able to make with the rest of your colours, because I have still not found a black pencil that can be as black as what you can see in a photograph or see in real life. So you're not going to be able to get it as exactly like your photograph. I hope I'm making sense. So once you've done that, what I like to do is get my eyes sort of as detailed as I need them to be able to see whether I've drawn them properly. So I'll do that first, and then I'll start putting in some details for the tongue and the teeth and the lips and the nose, like all of the important areas that you're going to be looking at. And then I'll start filling in the fur. So fur is always growing in different directions. So you want to look really carefully at what direction the fur is growing in, because if you draw it in the wrong direction, then it's not going to look right, because it sort of dictates the bone structure. So you want to make sure that you're moving your pencil in the same direction as what the fur is going in. And in terms of colour choice, you want to make sure that you're choosing your colour palette as much as you can before you start. So I'm using a very specific colour palette at the moment with this sketchbook, which is why you see a lot of bright pinks and blues. So choose your colour palette beforehand, and you want to try and make a lot of your colour choices, or at least a couple of colour choices, contrasting colours. So for the most part with this is I will be using orange and blue, and they're contrasting colours. So they make really interesting effects when you put them together, when you use them for light and dark. And this is also found in the photograph that I used, so that was very handy. And you want to go as lightly as you can, just in case you do make a mistake. then you can correct it. And I did make a couple of mistakes in here. I'm not sure if I've sped it up too fast, so you might not be able to see me using the rubber here and there. But I do a little bit of rubbing out here and there because I made a couple of mistakes when I was laying out the composition. But saying that, you don't want to be rubbing it out all the time. That's why it's really important to get your outline as perfect as possible. But obviously when you start filling in with colour, you see your mistakes a lot more obviously. So you can rub out, but try not to rub out very often because you'll destroy the paper. Another thing that I like to do is to use two different types of pencils. So you'll see me flipping between the Faber-Castell Polychromos pencils and the Caran d'Ache Luminance pencils. And I like those because they're made of different things. They're based on different things. The components are different. So the Caran d'Ache Luminance pencils are a wax-based pencil, and they lay down really fast, so they're great for filling in areas really quickly, and they're very soft, so they're good for like blurring out certain areas and making fur look soft, for instance. They sort of go on almost like a pastel, so they're very lovely and soft, like a nice soft texture. And the Polychromos by Faber-Castell, they're really sharp and hard. They're an oil-based pencil, so they're fantastic for details, for individual hairs, really good for getting in the corners of eyes and just being able to reach those places that Caran d'Ache Luminance pencils you struggle with, especially on a small portrait. So I would recommend using two different types of pencils. You don't have to use the exact ones that I'm using, obviously, but it is handy to have a couple of different ones for different jobs. But the Luminance pencils I love particularly because a lot of them are mixed with white, so you don't have to layer as much as you would do with the Polychromos pencils for really light areas. There's a yellow that I used that's just lovely in this portrait in particular because Hope, this is my dog by the way that I'm drawing, she's got really light fur. She's almost white in some areas, so going in with a fully pigmented colour would be too much for her. Now, something that I didn't used to do, mostly because I was terrified of it, was putting in a background. And I would highly recommend that you use backgrounds, even just a simple background like I'm doing at the moment, where I'm just putting in a block of colour, sort of in a rectangle. And this is brilliant because if you're working on white paper especially, you will be able to see the highlights so much more. And I've done so many portraits where I've left the white of the paper, I've left the background of the paper white, just the same colour as the paper, and that means that the highlights that are in the foreground don't pop. And I hope that you see the difference just putting that little wash of colour in the background has made, because I would recommend that you do that from the get-go. If you're just starting drawing portraits, then I think that's really important because highlights, they're what really make your portraits pop. Another thing that I used to really struggle with was finishing my portraits sort of at the bottom, knowing when to stop. And a mistake that I made was trying to keep everything really detailed, every single little part of the portrait really detailed. And I read this so many times and heard this so many times, people talking about it, but I just assumed that they were wrong or they didn't know what they were talking about. But if you focus all the detail on the parts of the portrait that people are going to look at and that you want them to look at, which is usually, for dogs, it will be the eyes in particular, and then maybe the mouth and the nose and possibly the ears. but no one's really paying that much attention to the neck. So that leaves the neck and the shoulders a perfect candidate for not putting so much detail in them, and that means that you can blend them really easily into nothing, so you can fade out the portrait really easily that way. So because you've put a background in, I used a different colour. I think it's called Malachite Green, the one that I used. It's a Caran d'Ache pencil, but I might be making that up. And I hadn't used any of that in the actual foreground, so you want to put some of the background colour into the foreground, and that just helps bring the portrait together. And you want to get a hard pencil. Usually I will use a Polychromos pencil for this, and just go around the edges and sharpen everything up and make sure everything is popping off from where it needs to be popped off. And something else that I used to struggle with so much was individual hairs, particularly white individual hairs. So when you're drawing whiskers, dogs obviously have whiskers coming from around the snout, and they also have whiskers coming off of their eyebrows. So I used to try and cut that out. So I would try and preserve the white of the paper and draw around them, but that's really difficult to do with pencil because the pencils are dusty. So that part, even if you're really careful, it will still get a little bit dusty, and it's just hard to keep that really clean. So what I've started doing a few years ago is using a white gel pen for that. And once you've got that down, you want to take a darker pencil and put a little shadow on those, and that'll make those stand out really nicely. And you want to add some darker hairs also, individual hairs with a darker pencil, which I have done here. So that is everything. I hope that helped you with your dog portrait needs. If anybody has any of those, I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, anything else you'd like to know, then just leave me a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week. Maybe not with a video, depends, because this actually took much longer than I thought it was going to, but it was fun anyway. But yeah, I will see you next week. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.